I'm looking forward to a robust conversation with my colleagues here, some very important individuals who are used to moving fast and pivoting on a dime as college and university presidents. And so we have a short amount of time, but I think some of our conversation will be very much aligned with the messages from Dr. Marasotis. And so I am very pleased to just quickly introduce, and these individuals need no introductions. Their biographies are listed in the app, but just want to let you know who's on the stage with me. First, we have Dr. Sue Ellspermann, who is the president of Ivy Tech Community College. It's the largest singly accredited statewide community college system in the nation, so welcome. We also have Dr. Sean Huddleston, who is the president of Martin University. Martin is Indiana's only predominantly Black institution. We also have Dr. Tanuja Singh, who is the president of the University of Indianapolis. She's been using her expertise in global education and innovation to lead the university since 2023. And finally, we're pleased to introduce Dr. Debbie Ford, who is the Chancellor of IU Southeast in New Albany, Indiana. She's a longtime expert in student success and has led IU Southeast since July of 2023. So please give our panelists a round of applause. And so as the moderator of this conversation, I was introduced a little earlier, but I think the most important role for me today is not my role in connection with Complete College America, but it is my role as a father. And so I have a 16-year-old son and a 12-year-old daughter who are here in Indiana, and I feel like there's some things that need to be solved in higher education. And so you're the folks to solve them. So we're going to jump right on in if you don't mind. So, and like I said, we're going to move real rapid fire, and so we'll take as many questions as we can. I will also share that we'll try to reserve a couple of minutes near the end for some audience questions, so we'll take as many as we can. I think there's some microphones in the audience, so just giving you a little heads up that if you want a question, you might want to get to the microphone first, all right? So the first question I think is a real simple one, and I'd love to hear from everyone on this one. The idea of presidential leadership in higher education is constantly changing. It is evolved from just 5 or 10 years ago, and it will continue to evolve. And so the real question for you is, how have you approached student success and completion in your role? Specifically, how has student success and this larger completion movement that CCA has been advancing helped you go all in for your campuses? And we can start on the far end. Sure. You know what I'm saying? Go for it.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. And I am so honored to represent Indiana University, the Indiana University regional campuses, and of course, my home campus, IU Southeast. I am a proud first-generation college graduate, and I am all in on student success. And I really like what Jamie said, is that I am for student success, and I think that's what we need to focus on. So within Indiana, our strategic plan is called IU 2030, and the first pillar is student success and opportunity. So that is our North Star of all the IU campuses. As a first-generation college grad, I feel that I have the responsibility to pay it forward. I also have the good fortune to be a leader in higher education with all of you. And Dhanfu, you said we need to make this happen. Well, it's we plus everybody here.
Absolutely.
And everybody on our campuses. So I want folks to know that. But one of the things you asked is, how is presidential leadership changing? This is my 16th year as a chancellor. And from what I can see, we are more all in, and the intensity of presidential leadership is more important than ever. We are having deeper conversations. We are having, using data more effectively across our campuses. And we do need to make sure that the student success initiatives and the promising practices that CCA has brought forward, we bring them to scale. And I'm with Jamie. It is a both and opportunity for us. So I'm excited to be here, and I'm even more excited about the work ahead.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, and I am absolutely delighted to be here representing the University of Indianapolis. So you asked a question, why is student success important? To me, and I guess everybody in this room, it is not just a college imperative. In my mind, student success is truly a moral imperative. When we are talking about the future of this country, which happens to be one of the most successful, one of the most talented country in the world, the question about student success is not whether we should, but how many different ways do we have that we can focus on student success. And that success differs depending upon the student, depending upon the background they come from, depending upon the early experiences that they've had. So at the University of Indianapolis, we have several students who are first in their family to go to college. And for these students, the model is very different from someone whose parents or other people went to college. So for us to acknowledge that one-size-fits-all model does not fit for all education, and it also does not fit for all students. The traditional model of what we considered the 18-year-old coming to college, staying for 4 years in college, graduating, getting a job, is still relevant, but it is not the only model that's relevant. There are many different approaches to ensuring that students are successful. They may be approaches for open loop learning. We call our non-traditional learners actually post-traditional learners, because all of us are in that space of learning all through our lives. So from a student success perspective, providing those opportunities across the spectrum, whether you want to come back to school and finish something you started, or you are just starting college, or you are just in between where you just want to learn a skill, universities should be open and available and accessible to all models of learning. A friend of mine calls it, we have to move away from the ivory towers to living in glass houses approach. And I'm a big believer that we do live in glass houses and it's for the better.
Absolutely. Dr. Huddleston.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I cannot see any of you.
Those lights are bright.
You are all in my heart. So I am so delighted to be here, and I thank you so much for the question. And I always love spending time with esteemed colleagues and agree with everything you've all said. So Martin University, just for contextual purposes, not only are we Indiana's only predominantly black institution of higher education, we're also the only four-year institution or university that primarily focuses on the post-traditional or non-traditional student. We were founded essentially to try to solve for or resolve the first-generation phenomenon that largely affected low-income and communities of color. And so the average age of our students is 32 years old. For us, we have come to realize that for far too long, we in higher education, and I would argue other sectors, tend to want to define things for other people all the time. We want to define the value of higher education. We also want to try to define student success. So we flipped it, and we said we want our students to define success for them. And so we start with the end in mind. And the end for us is not graduation, because graduation is commencement, and to commence is to start something. So our starting point is what you want to do with the credential that you earn. And after we have ascertained that information, then we begin to curate experiences for students that help to achieve the success that they define. In many cases, a lot of that success depends on our ability to help them navigate some of the barriers that will happen before they get to the classroom, while they're in the classroom, and outside of the classroom in general. So for example, we came to realize that because a number of our students, a good majority of our students, are single, head of household, and have a dependent child at home, that we needed to have on-site childcare, and we didn't need to make them pay for it. So we started by having that childcare. So when students are in class, then their children are being cared for by us. And interesting enough, when they bring their kids to school, all of a sudden, the kids think they're going to college too. So we decided to make sure we talk a little bit about college when we're there. But then our students came to us and said, you know, it's really great that in the evenings when I come to class, that you're able to care for my child, but I can't find a good preschool. So this year we opened up a free half-day preschool, where a session in the morning, session in the afternoon for those students.
Absolutely.
So that is one example of how we help our students to be able to not stress or worry about getting to that end result and ensuring that we always keep the end in mind.
Absolutely. Thank you.
It's great to follow such amazing colleagues over here. I want to speak a little bit building off of what you heard from Dr. Huddleston about the adult learner, because 70% of our students are adult working learners, part-time students, not the traditional 18-year-old. And as we've thought and leaned into that, yes, we need to do all the best practices in student success, and we can't ignore the employer, because our students are working, or they're going to go to work right after commencement, right? And that piece is so critical in how we think about student success. For instance, we know that students those undecided students who understand what career they want to pursue through career coaching when they arrive will be 10% more likely to graduate, because they now are on a career path that they know their why, and they will succeed. Our employer-sponsored students are much more likely to persist. So whether it's tuition assistance, or at Ivy Tech we have Achieve Your Degree, which more than 350 companies where we will enroll their employees as our students and then bill the company directly, so it never comes out of the wallet of the person who works for that company, which we know many can't pursue post-secondary education because they can't afford to pay that initial tuition and have it paid back later. And if you want to talk about the gold standard of completion, it's apprenticeship. You know, several of us have traveled to Switzerland, and we understand how the apprentice model, where someone is working and learning at the same time and gaining those competencies and seeing how they will succeed in the workforce. And I think when we think student success, we have to think very holistically. Yes, what happens when they're in our classrooms here, but how are we connecting them to their career that's going to go forward, and how are we making sure that our institution thinks of the employer and the workplace and industry as part of that student success?
I think a few of you talked about a few different directions that we go in this. On one end, you're talking about what do the students and how do they define their own success? And then there's the other part about it, which is we know many things that work, and how do we ensure that we bake those structural reforms into the cake? You know, it's great being here in Indiana for the 15th year annual convening, because our founding president was the commissioner of higher education and a former legislator. And so he was, you know, the champion for things like the 21st Century Scholars Program, which has provided access to so many of our students at our institutions, no matter age or background. And there's also been kind of the CCA theory of change that's been kind of woven into the fabric of Indiana. It was the first member of the CCA Alliance. So Indiana went all in on a few different things. You know, you passed legislation around ensuring every student had an academic map. You aligned the 15 to finish or on-time credit hours with 21st Century Scholars. You went in on developmental education. So you've done many of the things, and yet college presidencies are always changing and evolving. And so my question for you is, how do you ensure continuity in these things? You know, because everyone will say, you know, I checked that, I did it. But then when you really start digging and asking questions about, well, did you do it with fidelity? Or you ask questions of people like, well, somebody was doing it 10 years ago. I don't know who did it. I don't know what happened to it. So how do you keep these important initiatives moving forward when they might have preceded you, and you have individuals who never even knew about the work that took place 10 and 15 years ago?
Yeah.
And so anybody can jump in. We don't have to go in any particular order.
So, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
No, I would say that it's mission, right? So it is really keeping the mission, because absolutely the higher education landscape is going to change. The economic landscape is going to change, but your purpose has to remain true. And so for us, it has been carrying forth a mission. We were founded in 1977 by an African-American Benedictine monk who decided that the best course of action to make sure that kids coming out of high school went to college was to make sure that someone in their family had gone to college before they did. And so that's why we've had our focus. We launched a 5-year strategic plan back in 2022. And the title of it is mission-driven but future-focused. And so I think that's really key. We broke it up into 3 phases because I'm sure nobody in this room has gone through a 5-year strategic planning process and lost sight of the plan within the 5 years. I know all of you just stay.
No, never. That's never happened.
For me, I needed to break it up in smaller chunks. So first phase was called Reset and Reemerge, and we just wanted to figure out what should we keep doing, start doing, and stop doing. The second phase that we're in right now is called Anchor and Climb. And those things that we should keep doing and start doing begin to evolve and show us where we go next. And it's all tied to our mission. So for me, the answer is mission.
Absolutely. Dr. Singh.
So I'd like to share, if you think about it, if you want to institutionalize a best practice, that is the only way to keep best practices alive. And those things are obviously data-driven. So let me give you a simple example. The 21st Century Scholars Program, for example, one of the biggest challenges is retaining the students. So we wanted to identify what are the key challenges we face with any retention for our students. And we found out that really, not surprisingly, part of it was financial. Part of it was simply engaging with college and understanding how college works. Part of it was also what you mentioned earlier, what after college? Could they see themselves in a future that we were telling them awaits you? So we started with that, and again, I'm a relatively new president. I've been in my role for a year and a half, but these practices started a while back, and we have now converted them into best practices on a regular basis. So I'll give you an example. We have changed the retention percentages from about 50% for our 21st century scholars to almost 70% in the 2023 cohort from 2020 to 2024. That's a significant improvement.
Absolutely.
And the reason for that is not random. It is being driven by what do they need. So we have very consistently invested in first-year experience for our 21st century scholars. We now have themed living for our 21st century scholars, just like we have for a lot of other groups. We also have this idea that the questions they have sometimes may not be standardized in how we tend to think of student questions. Financial literacy alone, understanding how loans work, how repayment systems work, what does it mean to have a mortgage? Those were questions our students were not necessarily aware of. So coaching them from that perspective, and then finally the career that awaits them, for them to be able to dream what it would look like. And we are doing interventions, and I don't like the word, but that's kind of what it is, early on to figure out what is, of all these categories, what is it that's affecting them. So if it is that they are doing poorly in a math class versus they're struggling with how to pay their bills, we have coaches that, of course, have been supported by a lot of people that are in this room today. So we want to publicly acknowledge, the endowment. We want to acknowledge the multiple foundations. Those resources have helped us hire coaches. They've helped us hire appropriately so that we can target towards this. So from your perspective, it's mission-driven. And on top of that, you have to make sure that you are addressing the key things that are causing these challenges, and then institutionalize them. So when you have a different president, these things are built in, and how you bring them in.
Well, and I actually, if I can kind of add a little bit more to that, or at least kind of build off your question, and I really want to kind of address this to the two of my panelists on the end, because both of you are fairly new presidents in the Indiana system. So within the past year to year and a half. How do you lock those things in? I mean, you're coming in with new eyes and you get a chance to make these decisions, and some things have gone well. And so, I'm not talking to most of the people who are here in the audience because they're the A+ students.
That's right.
I'm talking about those individuals who sometimes sit back on their hands and say, you know what, this president will only be here for another 2 years. I can wait it out. How do you ensure the right things stay the right things?
We don't have those folks.
Well, when you laugh, this is like comedy, because when people laugh, it's the truth.
I know. Well, I think when I think about this, I think one of the most important things as a new leader coming into any organization, particularly a university, is you have to trust, you have to listen, and you have to be curious, okay? And so I think first and foremost, you have to trust your teams. And I think that's what we're able to do as we think about the student success initiatives that we are deploying and have deployed. I also think we have to listen and learn from our colleagues and our students, because I think we can look at the data and we know that the things that we're doing are not where we want them to be. And so we have to be truthful. I speak truth, right? Even when the data doesn't look so good, we have to acknowledge it, own it, and accept it. And I think in terms of being curious is keep asking more questions. And as a leader, what I'm looking at and some of the things we're doing within Indiana University and of course IU Southeast is how do we get these initiatives to scale? That's the opportunity. It works for a small group of students, but not enough students. That's my plea to our colleagues is how do we get this to scale? So I'm constantly, and some members of my team are here, and members of IU are here, right? We're here as a force.
Okay.
But I'm constantly saying it's working for this group, but is it working for this group? And how do we get to scale? I think that's the opportunity. But I also am not taking my foot off the accelerator because we have more work to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. So if you don't mind me kind of asking a different question, you have not only had a career in education, but you've also had a career in politics. And so I would be very interested in, if you truly are going to go all in, it's going to require collaboration. Like I said, this is a room of trusted folks. But, we don't always do a great job of connecting outside the walls of our campuses. And so how do you ensure that the things you were talking about related to workforce connections aligned with the curriculum, how do we do that well? Who should we be talking to who is not typically at the table?
Okay, so one of the things they teach politicians is to answer the question you wanted to be asked, not the one they asked. So I'm going to
and if you try to pivot, I'm going to bring it back.
I'll answer both, but I want to pick up on what I heard from my three colleagues and say another little nugget of truth. I come from industry. I'm an industrial engineer, and I will just say out and out, this won't surprise my team up here, we are not good at execution in higher ed. Right. We like to flitter around, and to your thing about best practice, we can have a best practice, but we can't scale it. We're not able to do that. So the fourth goal in our strategic plan is operational excellence. And Larry Miller, wherever you are from Greenville Tech, I'll talk about the 4 disciplines of execution. We've spent the last 3 years really bringing that in where you can drive to a wildly important goal and then have commitments from every team in the institution. So imagine 19 campuses of Ivy Tech, over 1,000 teams operating to improve retention. It is our wildly important goal, and everyone's focused on it. And we hold ourselves accountable. Every week I have a call with my chancellors. Every week they have a call with their cabinet and down and throughout the organization. And why I say that is most of us live in what is really a chaotic whirlwind, right? But 40X allows you to focus on the wildly important. And once you build the routine of doing things well, then you take on the next thing and the next. And that's how you embed best practices throughout. And I would just have all of us think, while we may teach good business practices in our classes, we are not always the best example of those in our institutions. And I really challenge higher ed, if we're going to operate our strategic plan at the speed of life, we have to be agile and excellent in the way business is. Okay, to partnerships. We also do have to be, as higher ed, we have to be the best partners to industry, whether that's Eli Lilly and a $15 million partnership committing to building a 1,000-person talent pipeline for their biopharmaceutical technicians and operators, et cetera, or whether that is the General Assembly when they're trying to move us all forward with FAFSA completions, or whether that is working with an industry association like Ivy Tech did to take our nursing expansion to help meet this incredible need the state had for nurses, but working with all the hospitals, all the systems to scale an increase of 900 additional seats across our 19 campuses to be the largest ASN, almost twice as big as the number 2 ASN provider in the country. But those partnerships are built on trust, accountability for us, humility because we don't have all the answers and we're serving that partner, and then making sure that we just come together with the resources we have. Often it's stone soup where we're all throwing something in order to be able to do what we need to do. But I don't think there's ever been a time where partnering outside the institution, yes, we expect good partnership and collaboration inside our institutions. That's one of our core values. But partnering outside to serve those that have given us these amazing missions we have is really, really, really important.
Absolutely. I'm going to just kind of take a quick second to pause and remind individuals that we might get a chance to take maybe 2 questions from the audience, or maybe one from this side and one from this side. I think I see the microphones out there. I'm going to ask another question, but if you're one of those individuals that has a burning question, by all means, step to the microphone and I'll get to you right afterwards. And so
they are there.
Yeah.
They're there.
I can see it. I can see it.
No, there's 4 people here. This is great.
You know, I don't know if this is the last question, but it's an important one. We were very intentional at CCA in timing this particular convening post-election because we know that many times we need space to talk about what is the agenda, what do we do next. I mean, these are the change agents. These are our community of impatient reformers. So they want to know immediately, what do we get to? And so we're in this space where, and I think, you know, Dr. Marasotis shared that there's been this public confidence erosion around higher education. And so how do we continue to emphasize the value of college, not only to the attendees, and, you know, and the recipients of the college education, but also state policymakers who are making the decisions that I think will really be more important in a next administration than ever before? How do we think about that kind of increasing public confidence, and what kind of direction would you give to practitioners and leaders and legislators in the audience who are trying to navigate this work?
I'm
By
happy.
all-
Go ahead.
By all means.
Okay, well, since I served in elected office, I would say what I've realized from that public servant end is each administration, each session allows some balls to move forward and some that are not going to be ready that time. And I think that's what we saw federally, and that's what we'll see in our states, is that there'll be an opportunity to do some things, and we may just have to keep our powder dry on some projects for a year or 2. Doesn't mean not do them. It just means this is the time to move some other things forward. And I think about where we have an ability as higher education to maybe not hold so tight to the way we've always been, but to lean in with where our general assemblies and where we hear the encouragement from industry and others. And I think I'll just use the example at Ivy Tech that as we have leaned into less about is it a credit program or is it a skills training? We don't use the term non-credit. We've banned that term at Ivy Tech because that's a real insult to tell somebody they're taking non-credit as if it's of no value. Thank you. So the new word of the day is skills training. But as we have met employers, our state, industry partners where they are without telling them that it has to be a credit program, we have seen our skills training increase, our certifications increase, and our credit increase. And we've opened doors to do credit for prior learning. We've opened new doors. So I think sometimes when we don't hold so tightly to saying, oh, well, you need to use this degree, you need to enroll in that, or we have these 3 choices for you, industry. No, what do you need, and we'll design for you. And I think this is a time where, for us, it's to really meet the moment at the speed of life, not say it'll take 3 years, we'll get it to you in 3 weeks, we'll be ready to go, as opposed, those are the kinds of challenges I think the moment will allow.
Dr. Singh.
So I'd just like to make, in addition to what you mentioned, it is our responsibility to also share why higher education is important and the outcomes that we are all engaged in. So what we have done is I'm new, so I knew about the Hoosier hospitality, but I also took it to mean people were very kind. They invited me into their space. So I took the opportunity to be in their space. And legislators here have been extremely generous with their time in their willingness to listen to why higher ed is important. So I shared the study that earlier was cited by Georgetown, but there's also the World Economic Forum study, and it speaks to the skill sets, but it also speaks to the outcomes. So whenever I have spoken with legislators in my very short time here, they've been very gracious in listening to what we are telling them. To your point, Dr. Ellspermann, is if we are talking about relevant education. So we developed a strategic plan that I know you all are waiting to hear about in 8 months. In 8 months. And a key part of this is we changed our mission statement. In fact, our mission now includes the word relevant, because relevant education is of interest to everyone. Relevant education is when we talk about here are the partnerships we have with corporate and community. In fact, our head of corporate and community partnerships, Andy Coker, is sitting here because we are very intentionally investing in what is required. So from that perspective, I think it's our responsibility to share the data and say, here is why, if we truly want to be the Silicon Valley of the Midwest or whatever the new terminology is, we have to make the investments, but we have to provide the data to say, here is why you have to make the investments so the state can grow and thrive.
Absolutely.
I would add, I think a couple of things I think about is what we can do better, more effectively, and continuously is tell the stories of impact. The impact that our students have on our campuses, on their lives, the impact that our faculty and staff have. Because when I tell stories about what's happening at IU Southeast, oftentimes folks will say, I didn't know that. And so, and we have to continually tell those stories. I think the other opportunity that we have is to seek more investments. And that's investments from state legislators, of course, federal legislators, but it's also from alumni and donors and community partners. And asking them to invest in scholarships for our students and high impact learning practices. It's the greatest return on investment anybody can have. And so we need to keep asking and keep telling and keep championing the joys that we find as being leaders on our college campuses.
Yeah, two things come to mind for me. One is I've always been a huge fan of the collective impact model. And there are 5 conditions to achieve collective impact. The first is to simply have a common agenda. Everybody on the same page. The second is to have a shared measurement tool so that we truly are measuring the same things in the same way. For example, iPads will say that your retention and completion rates are based on students who start at your institution and finish at your institution. We have many who come to the institution who aren't connected or aren't counted in that. The third is mutually reinforcing activities. The fourth is continued communication, and the fifth is backbone support, and that's where all of the resources will come in. So if we can keep an eye on collective impact, that's important. The second thing that comes to mind is that we love higher education. We always have, most people in here too, but we got to be careful not to love it to death. And loving it to death.
Say more, say more.
Loving it to death means that we got to be willing to shake it up, and we got to be willing to think of things very differently. So I'm going to do a little plug here for somebody that is a dear friend and a longtime colleague who is in the audience, and that's Dr. Adrian Hoggebrook, who is on the board of Complete College America. He is one of the nation's leading experts in competency-based education. Led that work for Southern New Hampshire University, one of the largest universities in the country. He has a TED Talk on YouTube, I think it has over 1 million views. It ought to take a look at it. But it really tells us that the credit hour model might not be the model that we need to be continuing with, right? And so those are the types of things that we need to be thinking about. And as higher education leaders and as a sector, we need to be prepared to approach the ultimate goal that we all have in a different way.
Absolutely. I'm looking at the microphones and I didn't see anyone. No, absolutely. Please give a round of applause on that one.
Good job.
You know, we are almost, Are you
Yeah,
going?
we have
You're
one.
going to the microphone. All right, we'll take this one question before we close out.
Good afternoon. My
And
name
please,
is
please introduce yourself. And
my name is Mililani Stewart, and I'm a student at Lawson State Community College in Birmingham, Alabama. And I have a question, but it's kind of two parts, so I'll be brief for time's sake. What specific actions can our institutions take to implement intentional strategies and to go all in on becoming more student-centered? But then also for you, any of you, how are you using AI to drive these efforts and make sure you're ensuring meaningful outcomes for students? Thank you.
Thank you. And Mililani is a member of one of our student advisory groups, so recognizing student voice I think is really critical. So I think that's one of the most important questions. So maybe we'll get one or two of you just to say how you're thinking about artificial intelligence, as well as how do you go all in on these strategies.
So I'll take the first one because I want to give somebody the opportunity to answer
Please.
the second. One of your questions was, what are you doing intentionally to make sure that these strategies stick for students? And that is to institutionalize it. So for example, for our scholars, we want to make sure we have a person who's in charge of the first year experience. And that experience includes every single aspect of their belonging at campus, both academic, financial, emotional, and anything that goes with it. And that investment has really helped us in translating some of the strategies to very, very active outcomes. That would be now institutionalized because that experience is institutionalized. I have examples of AI, but I want to give somebody else the chance to be able to answer that question as they would prefer.
So I'm happy to say that at Ivy Tech, we have a faculty and staff and IT function who all want to lean into AI. So we're not afraid of it. We want students to have literacy with it. We have a kind of a green, yellow, red coding that we can use on syllabi to kind of show you when it's okay to use it and when you shouldn't or with concerns. But our faculty are using it everywhere, from helping them develop their lectures, their courses better. Many ways to help simplify sometimes the grading, how the rubrics are, et cetera, so they can use it for themselves. Doing our own GPTs within our content areas that can help students get comfortable with it. I think for all of us, it's to give approval that we're going to use it, that we want to use it. We want our students to use it. When you leave us, you're going to be using it. When you're with us, you're going to be using it. Right. So let's just lean into it completely. So now my team's here, so you can ask them all the details on it. But for me as a leader, it's making sure that I clear the path, that we will be an institution that will always take advantage of technology, it's our responsibility to engage with. And while we have to be responsible, we can't let those fears get in the way of leaning in for the benefit of our students and their outcomes. So that may be a high level way.
Thank you. We'll take this last response on the far end, and then we'll go ahead and pivot to the next session, but by all means.
But I would add to that, what was said is, in the student services or student success space, a number of the technology tools that we're using on our campuses use AI. So we are already using it. Sometimes we don't think of it that way. That's one. But the other one is, in addition to what our faculty and staff are doing, the workshops that we're bringing to campus across Indiana University, I know that I am also learning, because this is a space that I don't feel comfortable in. And so I've committed to learn and try new things, attend workshops, so that I can then support our campus. I also think it's important as leaders, we support the early adopters and give them the runway to lead in this space, because that's what we're gonna need as we adapt to AI. It's here, it's not going away. And it can help us with student success.
Absolutely.
I'd like to make a concluding comment, if you wouldn't mind.
You have 30 seconds.
This is a pitch. University of Indianapolis is hosting a conference next year called AI for the Rest of Us, precisely because not all of us are in that space. And the second part is we host both the for AI approach, but also the contrarian approach. We just had a small conference talking about the the challenges with AI, while the business school and the College of Business at the University of Indianapolis has AI incorporated in every single course that it's teaching. So both views, the for and the opposing views. And that's one of the ways to address it.
So CCA leads a national committee on equitable AI student success. We'd love to partner with you on
We
it.
would love
There you
that.
go. Good.
And so, in closing, if you've never been to Indianapolis before, you haven't been in some time, right outside the JW Marriott, one of the administration buildings, kind of as you look toward the Capitol, used to say, Indiana, a state that works. And now the new mantra says, Indiana for the bold. And so what I would encourage you to do as you think about your work is think about the things that work, replicate them, do them with scale and fidelity, and be bold in your leadership. Please give me a round of applause for our panelists who are bold leaders themselves. Thank you. And I've been asked to give a couple of housekeeping items. So our next session begins in about 10 to 11 minutes, so you can find them in your app. And last night, while we were enjoying a networking beverage, someone saw a T-shirt, a Complete College America T-shirt, and they said, where can I get one of those? If you're interested in purchasing one of them, they have them at the front desk. They have been going fast, so if you want one, that's where they are. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you.